I'm Jay.
And I'm John.
And we're Bucket List Travellers. And in this Guatemala travel vlog, we'll answer the question, how expensive is travelling in Guatemala?
Why visit Guatemala?
Oh, well, firstly, it is the land of chocolate. It's where chocolate came from, so what more could you want? In addition to that, it just has so much natural beauty.
Yeah, whether it's Lake Atitlan, multiple volcanoes, and even the really fascinating Tikal ruins. There's something for everyone in Guatemala.
Oh, definitely. And it's a really great backpacker destination and a great place to go when traveling on a budget.
Yeah, we spent 13 days traveling through Guatemala, and we really wish we spent more time there. We're going to break down our expenses for the whole trip to Guatemala for you, and we'll start with accommodation.
So Guatemala has a great range of accommodation available, both Airbnbs as well as hotels and hostels. For budget accommodation, you can get a bed in a dorm for between $5 and $15 a night. For mid-range accommodation, expect to pay around $15 to $40 for a room per night. And for luxury accommodation, expect to pay between $60 and $250 per room per night.
In terms of our costs, our average cost per person worked out to be just under $12 US per night. Our cheapest accommodation was a room Airbnb in San Pedro La Laguna on Lake Atitlan, and that was under $12 for the both of us for the room. And then our most expensive was $40 US, and that was a hostel in Flores. The next component of our expenses is food. And one of the many great things about Guatemala is how cheap the food is. We only spent around $7 US per person per day.
Yeah, and a lot of that was thanks to being able to have our breakfast included in our room rate. But as well as that, food is just really inexpensive in Guatemala. You can get street food for around 75 cents to $1.50 for a serving. At local eateries, expect to pay around $5 per serving. And for a cafe meal or in a restaurant, expect to pay about $5 to $10 for a meal.
To also keep our costs down, we also got groceries and made our own sandwiches from time to time. And the average cost over our trip was around $1 per person per day. One of the things we really loved about Antigua in particular was the great range of restaurants on offer.
Yeah, and in particular, they really cater to vegetarians. So there was so many great vegetarian restaurants throughout the city.
Yeah, it was a really pleasant surprise. And one restaurant we highly recommend in particular is Huachuma. They had the best food. It was just amazing. You don't even realize that it's vegetarian. It's so good.
And if you want traditional Guatemalan food, we highly recommend the pepian soup. It's a chicken stew and it is the national dish of Guatemala, so it's a must try when you're in the country.
We tried that at the La Casa de las Sopas. And if you're looking for a local cheap eats restaurant, then make sure you check out Rincon Típico.
So in order to get around and see everything that Guatemala has to offer, you're going to need some transport.
We use shuttle buses for all of our travel throughout Guatemala, and that's quite a common way of getting around. You'd expect to pay around $15 for an 8-hour trip.
So that's around 125 quetzales. The terrain is really mountainous. There's a lot of hills, and that makes the travel time quite slow going. If you do want to speed up your trip a bit more, there are flights. There's a few airports throughout the country, and a domestic flight will generally set you back around $100 per person. So that's another alternative.
On the cheaper end of the scale, you've got the local public buses.
So a trip will cost you around 2 quetzales or 30 US cents. But do keep in mind that the trips will be quite crowded and slow going, and the bus stops aren't always central hubs, so you might need to transfer a few times and walk in between bus stops in order to get to your final destination.
It's still quite an experience, and whilst we didn't travel by the local bus in Guatemala, we did in El Salvador and Nicaragua, and we just love the experience. And no trip to Guatemala would be complete without all the various activities on offer. And the activities just range so much. You can do some very different things in the country.
We started off our trip with a trip to Tikal, which are Mayan ruins. They were fantastic. We did an all-day trip. We also had a guide which took our tour group around the ruins and explained various things. That was mainly in Spanish, so we wouldn't recommend that. You could just download an app and self-guide yourself around. But that whole trip, how much did that cost?
The tour and the bus was around $15 US. And then there's also the entry fees into Tikal, which are a further $20 US. So all in all, it's like $35 US per person.
So another tour we did was to go to Semuc Champey. Now these are beautiful waterfalls, natural swimming holes. That was $26 US per person for that trip. It was a full day tour. It included transport there as well as entry. And that was a really fun experience.
Yeah, it was awesome. So pretty. And it's even off the tourist trail a little bit because it's sort of in the middle of nowhere. But for us, it broke up the trip between Flores and Antigua. So that was a good stop off for us.
Now, the most exciting thing we did was to climb and stay overnight on a volcano. We did the Acatenango overnight volcano tour. That was absolutely amazing. It was a 1.5 day journey. You got to sleep in a cabin on a volcano and look at an active volcano. That was $67 US per person for the tour. And that included all your meals, the tour guide, some gear as well. And we highly recommend that.
Yeah, this activity should be on anyone's bucket list. This was one of the best activities that we'd have experienced in our lives so far. It was amazing.
Absolutely amazing.
Highly recommended. Now, it is quite painful to get up there, but the pain is worth absolute thrill of seeing a volcano erupt every 20 minutes. It's amazing.
So if you want to know more about these activities, we've actually created videos and blogs about each of these activities. So you can look at our past videos on our YouTube channel or go to our website, jjbucketlisttravelers.com.
Other costs you might be interested in when visiting Guatemala are border costs. So the good thing to note is that if you're crossing via land, there are no fees to pay when you enter or exit Guatemala. If you're flying in by air, there's no entry fee. However, there's a $30 exit tax that you will pay when you leave the country, but that should be included in your flight ticket.
So if you're coming to Guatemala during COVID, you need to be aware of any COVID-related costs. So when you enter Guatemala, you need to provide either a negative antigen or PCR test, or you need to have a proof of recovery from COVID 3 months before entering, or you need proof that you're fully vaccinated with 2 doses of your 2-dose vaccinations or 1 dose of your Johnson & Johnson.
To exit the country, it's likely that you're going to need a COVID test to get out, and there are plenty of places in private clinics or hospitals where you can get those tests. So as a rough guide, PCR tests are between $80 to $200, and antigen tests are between $40 to $80. So putting all of our expenses together, it worked out that for the 13 days we were in Guatemala, that we spent less than $900 US in total. And that worked out to be less than $35 per person per day.
So if you want more information about traveling in Guatemala, we actually have a Guatemala destination guide on our website, jjbucketlisttravelers.com.
So if you want to join us on our bucket list journey to reach 100 countries, then make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel.
We are Bucket List Travelers.
See you next time.